other thing I actually wanted to talk about is this podcast. It's a really good podcast. I actually I will link it. It's a really good podcast. Really enjoyed listening to it. And there are a few topics that I kind of wanted to mention as well, because I think DM is like so. Well, I could say he's so gosh darn good, but he's good because he has pretty much the same opinion that I have. So of course he's automatically good, right? That's not how this works. But yeah, he's just really locked in and says stuff and goes beyond of the surface level that a lot of Reddit posts don't mention, right? Reddit posts usually just go on the surface level and be like, fix this because of that. But DM goes like a step deeper, and it's like peak. Like he really understands it, and I love it. And he does this so many times during those 2 hours with a variety of things. So the first thing I want to go over is, what is the actual player power long term? And I think what he mentions here is, let me listen quickly into it.
The monk build that I see everybody do, you're probably running that on your Gemling Legionnaire, I would imagine.
Yeah.
With the
Herald of Ice, Herald of Thunder combo, and the bell. Yeah.
That stuff that just clears. It's never going to be like that. But then again, I think you and I could both agree that's probably not intended, right? That level of clearing. I don't know if that's intended or not.
I don't know. That's an interesting conversation, because I hear people say that it's like, this doesn't look like the PoE2 vision, and it's like, okay, maybe, but like, if not, then what actually is? Like, are we supposed to struggle with every pack of mobs? Because I'm gonna tell you this: if the point is that when we do the maps, I'm supposed to like fight every pack of mobs, I ain't playing this game for years. Like, I'm not.
Yes, exactly. A lot of people don't understand this. This is not fun long term. You don't want the Elden Ring combat with every 2 mobs forever. That's no. Personally, I would not want that, and I'm glad DM also thinks that.
I'm not going to do thousands of maps,
because I never heard people say that, right? They're like, no, slow the game down, but to what degree? Because I think he's going to mention it. I'm going to shut up.
Fight every pack of mobs. I ain't playing this game for years. Like, I'm not. Like, I'm not going to do thousands of maps, and then I can't screen clear. Like, if you can't screen clear, like when I'm doing tier 15, tier 16, I have 300 hours on the character, but I'm still doing the same, like amount as if when I just enter maps. What is the point? So, like, if you can't ramp to that point, then I don't understand.
That's exactly the point. Player progression. I always mention this. I mentioned this with Animal Well as well in my video on the main channel, right? You want player progression. Of course, Animal Well is a single-player game and stuff, but still, you want to feel the progression of your character. But you also don't want to do the same thing 10 hours later, the way you did it 10 hours later or before, right? You know what I mean? Like, you need something. But where else do you go instead of going, you need to clear monsters faster or clear more monsters, right? So that just has to be the thing. Keep in mind, Khan is also coming from I think he mentions this at the start, he comes from the Souls-like and Monster Hunter area, right? Where you have like one enemy and you just whack it a billion times. So, but he clearly understands also, I think, what RPGs are about, and I think agrees also to DM. But such a good point by DM. I'm like, yes, this is the content I want in my podcast. I'm tasty. It's so good.
So I do have that as a topic for us to talk about a little bit later. But
it comes up later.
Basically, the whole thing is, I'm not clearing as fast as they are, but let's say I can do a tier 11 map and solo self-found, obviously not trade league, so there's obviously going to be a little bit of downscale there. Also, True. My noobness, my build probably could be better optimized somewhere, something, because I'm still I'm looking at the nodes and being like, okay, maybe I'll put this node. The warrior is actually a character that I've respect a ton. So my mercenary with the grenades, I respect him once to get rid of some nodes that I'm like, I don't really like these all that much, so I took 2 or 3 nodes. That was about it. The warrior, I probably spent...
I think the topic was already mentioned. I'm sorry. I'm going to move on. Not saying it's a bad podcast. I'm sorry. I thought there was more, but it wasn't. My bad. I just wrote down the bad topics. But the next one is, and I quote, "Earthquake is cooking." Dumbo, good luck, have fun. Okay, bye, Inzig. Love you.
Dude, trying to play some of these moves was just a joke. All right.
So, Earthquake is cooking. That's what I have written down. Such a good moment.
Surround me and it's fucking over. So I I do trying to play some of these moves was just a joke. Or it's like the earthquake. Then I hit the ground and it's like,
Just wait.
guys, just wait. It's cooking. It's gonna boil. Like, it's like, what are we doing? Like, can my guy do damage now, today? Like, holy shit.
I remember the earthquake because my chat was telling me the same thing. They're like, oh, you're doing totems? Earthquake pairs really great with totems. And I was like,
I don't get
I'm
it.
looking at the tree and like, I think earthquake is one of the first ones, right? It's at the very top or something like that. And I was like, guys, sure, fine. I go and I make earthquake. And I was like, bam. And then you're sitting there looking at it. It's like, huh? When's the damage part?
Yeah.
When's the damage part gonna happen? Right? My totem.
I haven't played Warrior. I think I only like roughly heard about it through the grapevines, but it sounds so Warrior-like gameplay. It's like, where's the damage, boys? It's coming, and then just wait 2 more seconds. It sounds so bad. Oh god, it's just like a peak moment. Oh, I loved it. It's cooking, boys. Maybe I have to actually play Warrior and Earthquake and see how it feels. But it sounds awful. Like you do the attack and it's like damage. Okay, now it's here. It's like it's so bad. Oh man.
I think some of that was due.
So the next thing is difficulty of bosses and bad currency drops from the M is what I've written down. For context, I think he had a even worse experience than I had. If you watched my first live streams on the day of launch or launch date, is I barely got Exalt. And with barely, I mean I think I got 2 or 3. I think for the first and second act, and then I saw Jack for a long time, for a really, really, really long time. And I think DM had it even worse than I had. So that was rough. So just wanted to put that in here.
Due to the launch of the game, having lower currency drops. Like, for instance, I'm one of the people that got unlucky my first playthrough in the Warrior. I didn't get my first Exalted Orb to like level 44. So it was, quite literally like I'm in Cruel when I get my first Exalted Orb. So I experienced that, but I had, play tested the game 3 times already. So like I knew the first bosses and I knew what I was up for. So I kind of knew the moveset and I was able to play through. That being said, I, was having to do it without basically getting the ability to craft, because trade wasn't really a thing like the first, hours of the game being out.
Yeah.
So I didn't really get to craft anything or really get mini drops at all. And so I can see why people were getting gated so hard by some of these bosses, because they might have just run straight to the boss. They might have just followed the main quest line, got straight to the boss. They're maybe a level below the area, and then they also didn't get drops.
That's a good point. If you watch my streams, I did everything. I think I did everything unless I forgot. I think I forgot the Candlemass boss because I didn't understand the world map is not very clear, and also it has like 17 loading screens, so it's like really bad and feels bad to use because it just loads so long right now because of performance issues. So I didn't get the Candlemass in Act 1. I think I didn't then finally got it in Act 1 Cruel. But I did do all the side quests, so I think that kind of helped me push my power level up compared to other people that probably just did the main quest and then just got hard stuck at the Act 2 boss like Jamandra. That's, sounds bad.
And they have bad gear or something, and they're kind of getting dumpster. Then maybe they don't have runes yet, so they don't have code res for the boss or something like that also. And so, yeah, that definitely happened. And when they turned, my opinion on that at the time was like, I did a review of the game after I got the in-game and started playing, and I was like, my take is that it would be good if they turned up the currency a little bit, which they ended up doing.
Which they did immediately after, yeah.
They did like within like 19 hours or something in the video. It wasn't my feedback. It was like everyone's feedback was they were already working on that at the time, but I just happened to voice it directly before the update. And it felt better at the time. But like my opinion was, I think a lot of people were getting frustrated because they gave you systems in the game to make your power increase, but they didn't really give you the ability to interact with the systems. Like I didn't realistically be able to do any crafting at all through the campaign in my playthrough. I just had to pick up what was in the vendors and go. And that's all I really had to work with, because I had 1 exalted orb, or 2, I think, by the time I got to maps. So that wasn't really a realistic option. And
yeah, it was rough. I also think it I don't know what you guys think, but I heard it from Crip, and I think when I did like a fake league start again with 2 more characters, I noticed I did what Crip said, which was, do not disenchant items, just sell them for gold and use that gold to buy items, which is way, 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 way better. Because, first of all, you get just enough gold for it to matter, but also you know what item you're going to buy. You see it, right? You see the weapon with increased fizz and you get it. If you have a regal orb after disenchanting 10 rare items and it gives you life on kill or something on your bow as a bow character, you are fricked. You are screwed, right? So right now I think something's off a little bit. I don't know if they should give you less gold. Like, again, it kind of actually comes back to, why is crafting so gosh darn difficult? Why is getting a decent item early on so difficult? For what reason, right? It reminds me of what Cicerin said, where it should be balanced, that life and res should be easier to craft in the first 2 steps, like at the beginning of the crafting session of the item, than at the end. Right? It should become way more difficult. But on the other side, if you do that, why the heck would you exalt slam an item later on when you find it off the ground? Right? I don't know. I mean, like, really I can hate not having scours or alterations or PoE 1 chaos or PoE 1 essence or PoE delve crafting or PoE harvest. So you want PoE 1. Have you heard PoE 1 still exists? No, I think actually, I understand though, but I don't want scours and alterations to be a thing. I freaking hated them. I hated the system of, I think DS Lily had actually a podcast recently with Catmaster P. And she was like mentioning you have like some sort of like crafting session, or it's really easy in hardcore to, I think, get certain items. Like you farm X amount of content. I think it's right now you go to Settlers of Kulgur, get a bunch of alteration orbs, spam 5,000 alteration orbs on some items, and then you suddenly have like a trickster ES character and you're a god, right? And you also have the damage because of it or something. And I'm like, but is that good? Is spamming 5,000 alteration orbs actually good? No. In my opinion, it's god-awful. It goes back to, can we like do less garbage RSI inducing shit and just bring the game into the next generation of RPGs? Like, please? And I think no scours and alterations is definitely a good thing. Also, keep in mind, because we don't have scours and alterations is why we now don't have reflect on maps. Because they can't give you literally build-breaking things anymore. Because you wouldn't be able to remove it. So, that's good. I still have to throw away 90% of my maps because they either have ailment threshold or ground effects or temporal chains. But that's a different thing. I mean, I ran lots of Burning Ground maps. It's fine. It's fine. You need some sort of recovery anyways, on average. So, but it's a bit annoying.
Alchemy orb.
So yeah, there was that. DM. The next thing I wanted to say is DM on the play style during the end game of PoE 1 and 2. I mean, yeah, me too. I'm completely fine with Burning Ground. I mean, I'm not anymore, but I was for a long time. But you know, you want to go faster and do less annoying stuff, and you'll find more more waste stones, so you just throw away the ones you don't want. A lot of complaints about it. But damn, I've heard a lot of complaints. Yeah, true. So DM on the playstyle during the end game of PoE 1 and 2, again, a really, really good point by DM again, and I love that he mentions that. So
until you get the maps. And then you play like maybe your tier 1 maps and your tier 2 maps, and that's still kind of Path of Exile 2, but it's getting way faster. And then once you get to like tier 4s and tier 5s, you're no longer playing Path of Exile 2, you're playing Path of Exile 1 at that point.
I mean, I like Path of Exile when in-game. I feel like I constantly hear that Path of Exile when in-game is the best of every ARPG. It has the most depth. There's all of this, and it's what's keep people looped into the game for years and years and years.
Agree.
I've seen that same dialogue point of like it's PoE 2 until you get, you know, and then it's PoE 1 again. And I've heard people use that as like, well, we should make it PoE 2. But in my opinion, like you have to have the in-game be different, and it's also what made people continue to praise PoE 1 and grow the player base year over year. So I kind of wanted to necessarily remain the same way as the campaign all the times. I think that you play through the campaign, but then I'm also hearing points about people like the campaign takes too long and it's a drag, etc. I don't want to do this on every character. You said yourself you're only going to play one character because of how long it takes. So it's like, okay, well, if it's that same way in-game also, I have a feeling your playtime would probably actually be less than more if you change the way the in-game actually works. I think you would quit the game sooner. I think when people get to the in-game, they actually want to feel like they're crushing a lot of the mobs, and they want to actually start to make progress towards their character in terms of gear progression, in terms of tiers of maps and pinnacle boss progression. I think if we slow them down to the campaign pacing in order to try to keep the Dark Souls vision or whatever alive, it's not the reason people play ARPGs anymore. I think if you want that experience, you have it in the campaign, and you have multiple characters you can run through the campaign to get that pacing and the bossing and the feeling and the progression. You could do hardcore, and there's all these things you could do. But in terms of like actual in-game, I think it should be faster paced. I think there should be more mobs you're killing. I think you should be able to get powered up. I had this discussion on stream the other day, and someone had the same point. And I said, okay, so let me ask you this. Let's say that we get to, and I'll ask you the same question. We get to in-game, all right? You're in the maps, let's say you're going the same pace in tier 5 maps, okay, as you did in the campaign. And you do tier 5 maps, let's say, for 3 hours, okay? And you get a couple meaningful upgrades in terms of your gear. How much faster, after those 3 hours of progression of playing the maps and getting, let's say, 2 new pieces of gear, do you think you should be able to go through that same map?
So you're saying it would take me 3 hours to complete like the 10 tier 5 maps? Is that what you're saying?
The 3 hours are arbitrary. It's just a point of like you've played the game for a while. It could be 10 hours. Let's say you played 10 hours of tier 5 maps. Your character has made progression. You are a stronger character than you were previously. Now that you've played for, let's say, 10 hours of those maps, how much faster should you be in the same level of power, aka those maps? Should you even be faster at all?
Yeah, I think you should be a little bit faster. The thing to me is always, when I start thinking about faster, the thing that instantly jumps to my mind is like, you should be faster, yes. You shouldn't be Herald of Ice, Herald of Lightning faster. If that makes sense.
And that's probably an outlier. I mean, I'm sure Herald of Ice is going to get nerfed.
Or Spark Sorceress faster, right? I think that the pacing that I'm going through maps right now, I feel like that's been pretty good with my Totem Warrior. And my Totem Warrior is not, I don't even have like a 5-link yet because it hasn't dropped. So I'm on tier 11, no 5 links. So I'm just sitting there with my little 3 support gems on my totems, which makes them not that powerful.
Khan is definitely someone who prefers is fine with a slower playstyle, because he probably he also mentioned he didn't experience PoE 1 endgame, so you have to think a bit about it that way. So there's a little bit of that PoE 1. Like, PoE 2 needs to be different from PoE 1, that's true. But I really like DM's point here. Like, PoE 1's endgame is this popular because of blasting a bunch of mobs. And quickly. And if PoE 2 endgame isn't that, where's the progression? You need to feel some sort of progression. And I feel like a lot of Reddit posts constantly miss that thing. Or when people say, yeah, I want it slow or something, they forget what the fun part is. If it's fun for some people to go one mob pack after another and slowly kill one mob after a time, that's fine. But that's clearly not even where the game starts at. Because if you Sunder in Act 1 after clear fail, you already hit 3 mobs. That's the first skill you get, right? So there's already some massive AoE going on, even with melee characters. Spark is hot garbage because you hit about 1 mob and then nothing else. Or maybe it comes back. I hate Spark so much. Anyways, but I love that he mentions this. I really like that he mentions this. There's another I think there's another great point at 127 from what I wrote down. So let's listen to that.
Tier 1 breach boss example. You need 6 million damage, right? So he has to detonate dead one-shotting, tier 4 arbiter. Like, I'm sure there's going to be some tuning in terms of one-shotting in-game pinnacle bosses. Yeah, probably. I would agree with you there. Okay. But in terms of, in order to get you, let's say your Warbringer character, to be able to do, let's use the very first tier 1 breach boss example. You need 6 million damage, right? So he has 6 million health. So you're in tier like 11 maps, you said, right? So your bosses are...
That's going to take a while.
Yeah.
It's going to take you a while. Yeah. Right. So once... It's going to take you quite a bit of time. So you're going to need to be significantly stronger than you already are, which means by the time that you become that significantly stronger, the maps that you're in, you're going to be one-shotting everything, right?
Yeah, sure.
Okay, so now if we extrapolate out that same spectrum here, and we go now, in order to be able to do tier 4 arbiter in-game boss, you're probably still going to be one-shotting tier 15 maps. There's tier 15, 16, 17, and 18 maps. Yep. So if you're able to one-shot everything on the higher end, and that's the end goal of, or not even one-shot the boss, just be able to defeat the boss in tier 4 eventually, then your build's going to have to be strong enough to shit on content that is tier 15 maps, etc., or else the numbers literally aren't going to work out. So the argument, in order for it to be like, we need the pacing to be slower, the PoE 2, you actually have to nerf the top tier content bosses significantly in order to actually make that work, or else these are unachievable things, which actually means that the ceiling on which builds can be is going to be pushed down significantly. So even though the argument might work in terms of pacing, in terms of actual variety of builds and how strong builds are going to be, it's actually an argument to nerf the ceiling of builds and how wild the game can become, which I don't think is a good argument to make, because that's what made people fall in love with PoE 1 in the beginning. The feeling of like, I made a wild build that does fuckloads of damage, where you're going to need that fuckload of damage to do 65 million damage in the tier 4 arbiter boss or whatever it is, which by inherently, because you made that build, means you're going to be one-shotting through the other related maps, unless you're doing a setup style one-shot build or something like that, in which you have to set up everything to only one-shot one particular mob, which typically, in the example of like King Konger with the Hammer of the Gods build, doing 265 million in one hit, you can't use Hammer of Gods in all those mobs, so your map clears, bad.
So...
Two things. First of all, by the way, there's literally the mechanic of dropping the hammer and one-shotting the pinnacle boss in the end game. By the way, spoiler for anyone who hasn't seen or finished pinnacle boss, by the way, or heard about it. He mentioned the name. Maybe you didn't hear it. Good, perfect. Don't listen. He also mentioned like, you can one-shot these bosses, but map clear is shit. So DM also realizes there's a difference between, oh my god, they're one-shotting the bosses. Yeah, but getting there, like running a billion maps is god-awful with this build, right? So I love that he understands that difference, because that's the difference I never understood for a long time with builds, where a build needs to be fun in maps, because if it's not fun in maps, what the flying heck am I doing? That is the end game, running maps. So if my build can't clear a bunch of mobs over and over and over in a split second, it's not fun. Even if it could delete bosses, I'm doing maps a lot more. So I love that DM understood that. And with the bosses, the math is mathing for him, right? Which makes sense, because you need some sort of, to be able to kill a boss with 6 million DPS in a reasonable amount of time, whatever that means to someone. But even just doing some amount of damage to survive a few attacks before you run out of health flasks, you need some sort of DPS, right? You can't go into that boss dealing 20 DPS or even 20,000 DPS. It's going to take you probably way too long. So, maybe 20,000 DPS, to be honest. But yeah, for that, you also need to like be able to clear a shit ton of maps. At that point, you just clear the maps way faster. So it's such a good point by him. Imagine if they put damage thresholds on bosses, like you're only allowed to do 20% damage per 30 seconds. Would be fucked, but yeah, they won't do that because again, that screws what the M said. You want to have builds in the game that shit on bosses, right? You want that because that's the fun part about ARPGs. That's what a lot of people don't understand or maybe miss. And I think the M again mentions lots of these points where a lot of people just only see the surface, but he's like, no, that's the fun part, right? The game is popular, like PoE 1 and 2 is popular because there are builds that can achieve that. Because that's literally my biggest problem in Elden Ring and in Animal Well and a lot of other games where it's like, you don't even allow me to achieve this, right? And the only way to really beat bosses in most single-player games is usually skill-wise and not numbers-wise. Probably because it's a game first and not like a spreadsheet simulator. I understand that, but I want to achieve this at some point and feel the progression and feel the power. You can achieve one-shot Elden Ring, though. Okay. Again, but getting there is ass. Right? Like, that's the problem, I think. I've never seen Elden Ring of, like, I only saw, like, one-shots in Elden Ring, but how do you get there? Not really. It's quite easy, actually. I don't know. Like, again, the thing I played... Dark Souls 3, we know I played it with a build, it still sucked ass, right? The getting there is the part, right? That matters too, because you can't say, well, in Path of Exile 2, you can one-shot every boss, the game is bad. But getting there will take you 1,000 hours, 6 unique items that cost 5,000 divines each. That doesn't matter at this point, right? Yeah, obviously at that point, you should be able to one-shot bosses. But getting there is ass, right? And the ass part, there shouldn't be any ass part. I hate ass. But figuring out on your own is basically impossible. Again, that's what I mean. You need to balance around that. I don't want like, yeah, well, actually, if you... no. The progression needs to be fun. The journey to get there needs to be fun. And the solution needs to be sick. That's the point. And usually a lot of games make the progression either super slow and ass, or then the high end, literally, oh, I did this for that? Well, that's kind of not good, right? I mean, single player games is difficult to do that. But yeah, I think Path of Exile 2 definitely has that, right? But you need to be careful with balancing that. So that's just another very good point. 131 is another good point. So there's a point of Khan saying Pinnacle boss should be earlier. I don't think this is... so my notes, by the way, I don't think this is good because that makes the name worthless. So I don't think Pinnacle bosses should be early on because they have the name Pinnacle. It's at the top. So why should they be earlier? Makes no sense. But that could also be just the issue of the name being bad. Right? The name Pinnacle itself, the name, the word, the meaning behind the word. Maybe that's just a bad word to use because now they need to be later, but at that point, most people don't experience them for a really long time, and it's kind of boring. So maybe they need to add something in between. I think Path of Exile 1 endgame has that a little bit, where you fight the sub-bosses, right? I think they're pretty darn good. But maybe you need like every like map tier 4, map tier 8, map tier 12, map 16, or Waystone, sorry, tier 4, tier 8, tier 12, tier 16. Maybe you need something after each thingy to like keep it engaged, right? They don't need to be called Pinnacle, but they need to be parts of the Pinnacle boss. I mean, of course, I'm talking about like add 16 new bosses, but that is, we kind of need to have that, right? If you want to keep players playing.
Million HP in a normal map boss as well, which will take me, at least a few seconds instead of one-shotting. Like it's going to take me 10, 15, 20 seconds or something to kill the boss as well. So in terms of a tier 15 non-juiced map, like normal white map, 0 out of 10 on the Atlas tree, etc. They are light years difference in terms of HP and difficulty as a tier 1 pinnacle
Tier 1
boss.
pinnacle boss. Yeah. See, because that's the point that I was. So to me, and again, I'm coming in as a newcomer, and I want anybody that watches this now to be like, okay, why is this guy trying to change it? I'm not trying to change everything. I'm just trying to think through it logically. And my logic would be, wouldn't it be better for the whole pacing of it if you would actually start doing pinnacle bosses a little bit earlier? So let's say I'm in tier 11 right now. Let's say that would be the approximate difficulty of tier 1 pinnacle boss. Then by the time you would get to like tier 15s, that would be the approximate difficulty of like a tier 4. Because at that point, you would be all juiced up to kill the tier 4 boss like you described, but at the same time, you're still not one-shotting the tier 16s or tier 18 maps or whatever.
We have some common ground in this opinion. Like I actually feel somewhat similarly. So in Path of Exile 1, how far did you get into map progression?
Oh, I never even got the maps in Path of Exile 1. I'm a complete newcomer. So,
sure. Yeah. So in PoE 1, they have something that are called like quest invites. So as you're progressing.
Yeah, I do like the idea. I think Balamage also mentioned this, and a few other people also mentioned this. I think we have pretty much solved this issue of pinnacle bosses being like impossible. I think there should be something like an invitation. I think there should be something like an invitation to all the bosses at least once, right? So you can have, but then, God, it's so difficult to then balance it because again, they're called pinnacle bosses. They should be the pinnacle of the end game. So why the heck would they come earlier? It's like saying the peak of this mountain is actually way lower. But I see the peak of the mountain right now. Why is there another peak further down below? That makes no sense. So they need to change, I think, the name of what that actually means. They can still have the pinnacle bosses, but maybe brutally honest, for Breach, just add the other Breach bosses. I'm just saying. They could. So, but yeah, I really want quest invites for at least the first time for bosses or some bosses. Yeah, I think that's a good way to do it. I don't know how they're going to make that happen. Because, what, are you going to pick up quest splinters? Now, people will bitch about, oh my god, now I have to pick up the quest splinters and not the real splinters, so now I can't even sell it, but I want to sell it because I don't even want to do that boss. I hate that boss, so I want to just sell the splinters and get money so I can upgrade my build, but now I have to do the quest and have to pick up... You see what I mean? Like, the splinters itself, I think, might be the issue. maybe the splinters in themselves are bad. What would you say? Okay, I had this idea, and now I have to go to the toilet. I'm sorry for the VOD enjoyers. I'm sorry. Think about this. What if, because Doriani lets us use the cigarette, we can now travel through different areas and time and worlds, or I don't know what the heck is going on right now. What if it's not about the splinters, but it's about the encounters of said thing? So, for example, if you are in the breach for a certain periods of time, 10 seconds, 20, 30, 40, 50, you get some arbitrary number that then is at the edge of the atlas. So if you open U, like the end game screen, you have on the side the amount of points for breach. And each, I don't know, let's say 10 breaches, or let us say some number, 100. Let's say 100. If you reach 100, like the number 100 for breach, Doriani's has now gathered the energy to open the portals to the boss. So no more splinters, but you need to be in that content for a long time for this number to increase. We already have this with Delirium, right? It goes up from 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and maybe you get an arbitrary number of, you have achieved 5 Delirium, thus you get 5 points. So you now need to do this, I have 5 out of 100. If I have 100, I can now enter the Delirium boss, or that encounter. Maybe that's a way to do it. It wouldn't be too weird, because it's already kind of a thing with Delirium. Why is it 4 out of 5? Or you become more delirious. Yeah, but then we can also just say you gather more energy or something, or Doriani just figures out to hone on, like understands the energy of breach and now hones onto that energy, and because you do it way more often, and encounter more and more. Like, you can even turn up the difficulty of breach if you want to. Like, just turn this up, right? To just go freaking insane. Like, it literally goes exponential potentially, right? If you like have breach go up to like number 10, it like kicks your teeth in. Let's freaking go. Like, the people, that sounds good, because now your build needs to be even better to handle way higher breach content, because you want to keep it going for much longer to get to the boss earlier. I'm gonna go to the toilet. Think about that. I feel like that's kind of a decent idea. Who knows? Toilet time. Also, drink water. Hello? Ooh, drink coffee. No. No coffee. Hold up. Green tea. Hello, Cosmic. How you doing? Welcome, welcome. Cheers, by the way. Cheers. Piss. What? Nothing. Oh, yeah, that's good. Oh, yeah, that's good. Okay. I'm back. Vaude and Joyas, welcome, welcome. Hope you stayed hydrated like I told you to. Now, let's go back to this. I have a few more points I want to go over, because DM is spitting facts right now. Damn, I need to buy tea and throw away my 4-year-old tea bags. Yes, or you can drink the 4-year-old tea bags. Yeah, let me go back straight into this.
In PoE 1, they have something that are called like quest invites. So as you're progressing through, like, it does the same thing.
Actually, I already mentioned this. Yeah, the quest invites. Good idea. Hope they're a thing. I don't know how they're gonna make this with splinters. I feel like splinters need to go away. Brutally honest. I think splinters need to go away. Make it easier. Make it simpler. I want a literal number on the side on my atlas telling me you need to go to 100, then you can beat the boss. And you can maybe stack this up to like 1 billion, and then you can do 12 invites or something. Similar to master missions, you can stack them up and then do 50. I want this for most of the content. Brutally honest. I hope that's the way to go. I really hope. I really hope. Rip the fragment tab, but yeah. Is tea fine after that long though? I mean, you boil it in 90-degree hot water, so bacteria is dead. mostly. So that was that. There's another good point that I want to mention or show. So again, another good point by DM. So let's listen into it.
To become strong enough to shit on all of the content in the game should exist? Yes. Because if it does not, then what are we chasing? Like, if we don't have the ability to become so strong to dumpster content, and we're always going to struggle, like you have the most strongest boss in the game, you always have to struggle against it no matter what build you have, there's not really, you know, a lot of shining stars in terms of builds if they're all going to perform similarly in every scenario. So if there's builds that are boss killer builds, but builds that while you're a boss killer maybe doesn't do so good in map clearing, builds like that, yeah, they should exist. This existed in PoE 1, like you could make a boss killer build that's more of a boss killer, but you have like your map farmer build. So like I have a build that is better against bosses, it's my Ice Strike Monk. And then I have a Gemlian Legionnaire that's like a stat stacker that's better at clearing the maps. So I clear the maps with my stat stacker, then I swap to the boss killer to fight the bosses because it's a little bit better against it. And I like the concepts of having builds that are specifically for that.
So wait.
So first of all, good point. You want builds, of course, to shit on content long term. Otherwise, what's the point? That's the reason why I love Path of Exile, because you can do that. A lot of games don't allow that, like I said. But another thing that I actually prefer not to have is having two separate builds. I'm brutally honest. I think GGG understands this, and that's the reason why we have combos. That's also how the game is balanced. Because, I mean, you can maybe change this up as it... I think that also would feel... So, first of all, you go through the act and you need to beat bosses, but you also need to clear mobs. Both need to work. Otherwise, you cannot finish the story. Okay, but what if you then split it apart more and more in the endgame, right? You go to the pinnacle bosses and you realize, oh, I need way more single target that my build now cannot do unless maybe I change a few things. Should that be a thing? I say no. I think a build should be able to do both. Because that is what I love in Path of Exile 1. It can do both, right? It might not be the most optimal thing, but it should be possible. So that's pretty much where I stand with this. I think having, of course, a build that is more single target oriented and shits on bosses should, of course, be a thing. And then the other way with mapping, but every build should be able to do both content. Maybe not optimally, but it should have the option. It should 100% have the option. So there's that. Then again, another good point by DM. Bless him. Again, he understands it. Once again, a meta will always exist no matter what. That's pretty much what I say. Let's hear him.
Of the build was never really something that I even factored into whether or not it should be, because naturally, yeah, there are some builds that should potentially be more powerful, but I still feel like there needs to be some amount of a ceiling, because like you can run the risk of, like, I think the developers themselves stated in that interview, you don't want the players to feel that this is the only way to play the game, which right now it almost feels that way for me. Like, if I was somebody that cares about meta, I would be, if you're not playing the Herald of Ice, Herald of Lightning, what are you doing? It's a waste of time. But I don't care that much about the meta, so I'm happy. Like, I'll play slower than the other ones. It's whatever. I'm never going to be a top tier player in here anyway, so I don't care. But yeah, it's a balancing act, basically, is what we're getting at.
I do want to mention, you don't need to try to be a top tier player to have fun in the game. It's also about what do you want with your build, long term, right? What do you want to, or what do you want with your build? What do you want story wise? What do you want boss wise potentially? And if you want to see the pinnacle of what the game offers, you kind of need a good build. And if something is clearly better at something, which is clearing, why not do that? because it clears, which means you kill more mobs, which means you get more loot, which means you can do and you can achieve what you want faster. Of course, only going faster is not always the case, but you also have to be kind of realistic of or you can think ahead in the future, right? We have the noggin for that and think, wait a second, how much time do I realistically have? Not now, but in the next month. Okay? How long does it take me right now with my build to do X? And how long would it realistically take me with my current strategy to get there? To get to the boss, to get the lore at the end of the pinnacle boss or whatever. And if you realize, wait, the math ain't mathing, you need to change, right? In my opinion. That's just what I want, right? I want to achieve something faster, and if something is there for me to achieve this faster, but I also enjoy it, of course, subjectively, I will, of course, do that, because why wouldn't I? Why would I struggle against each monster pack? Like, what's the point? Like, I personally don't want that, right? But, again.
So, I agree. I would say in terms of meta, metas will always exist no matter what you do. So they can nerf Herald of Ice, Herald of Thunder. Sure, there will be a new meta. People will figure out what's
people will find something else. Yeah,
it's just the best thing that's out currently, and no matter how many nerfs you do, there will always be a best thing. And that best thing, you'll see most people playing because they want to farm either economically as viable as possible. Your real life time is time is money, friends. So your real life time is very valuable. Yep. So if you can run 5 times as many maps as a build that isn't using an item, like why would they not just use the item and save 5 times as much of their real life time? People are going to always cater to attempting to do that. And so just nerfing metas is typically not something that I believe they do either. I think they're trying to focus on whether or not intended interactions exist. And if it's, this is an intended interaction and people figure it out, well, that's fine. That's how it's intended. If it's not intended that Herald of Ice, Herald of Thunder are supposed to combo together due to the infusion support gems, and they're not supposed to recursively proc, well, then we might see an armor explosion type of nerf like they did with armor explosion, where that was recursively procking as well. So I don't know what's intended. If you take away Herald of Ice, screen clear is going to take a massive nerf in a lot of builds. So which is going to lower the pace of the game significantly in people that are running those builds, which means there will be another build that people will go out and find the screen clears, and then we'll all convert to that build once people figure it out. That's probably how it's going to end up turning out, I would assume.
Yep. That's just how it is. A meta will always exist, and people will always play the hot new thing, which is fine. And I think GGG knows that. It depends on what the hot new, how strong the hot new thing is, right? That needs to be looked at and potentially brought down. Because it otherwise doesn't. Because only when you are limited in power, people will try to find new better stuff, and new better stuff will pop up, right? I think, funny enough, because what was so broken at the beginning of the early access? Was it armor? Was it some shock? Was it aftershock? Aftershock did, I think, a lot, but I think that was less clear. There was more single target. Oh, no, the gas explosion. The gas explosion. That is the thing, was the thing. I mean, keep in mind, nothing happens. It's a balance, right? It's always gray. But it's interesting how you had the gas explosion and then fire, like gas arrows and explosion, right? To clear stuff. But 2 weeks later, or I think less than 2 weeks later, people found out the Herald of Ice explosion exists, right? And they started figuring that out. Because you took something that was really good for clear, and people found new ways to experiment, right? They find new stuff. So a meta will always exist. And I think a meta is good. A meta is always good. I mean, it doesn't matter if it's good or bad. It will always exist. People will tend towards, me included, I will always go for the meta, usually, because if it clears better than everything else, why wouldn't I do this? Again, 99% of your time is doing maps, at least for me. If that ain't doing it fast, or fast to a degree I am comfortable with, why the heck would I play this build? I'm sorry. Like, it needs to be really fun, or just kind of wacky. I don't know, like, to me at least, if you're just like, no, I'm gonna do a bosser, do a bosser. But 99%, mark my words, to get that bosser rolling, you need to do maps to level. So you need to do maps anyways. That's the end game. Another point, increasing loot drops over the course of the game, or in general being able to manipulate it, is important, is what I mentioned. So about loot drops, let's skip ahead to 155.
Basically build around that stat in a rare item, which makes the rarity pieces like actually quite expensive. And that whole concept,
It's about magic find.
I think we just pick a side. Like, do we want rarity as a concept? Do we not want rarity as a concept? If they want rarity as a concept, okay, they need to balance. Don't change anything. Then just balance how much rarity actually affects things. Either remove it from currency if people actually think it's affecting the economy and they have the data to see that, or leave it in and just affect how actual good it is. Put a cap or something. Like, they can change the numbers, but I just don't like rarity as a concept in particular in gear and having to build around it. It felt kind of cool in D2, but I would stack it just for like, I stack it for dopamine. Like, I stack it for like, I just want the cool excitement of maybe getting something cool. But instead, it's more like I'm printing money, is what it feels like.
The thing about it in D2 was that I would just have this one character, which was a Sork, because you had the static spell that removes 1/3 of the boss's HP every time that you cast, and then you do like a firewall to finish him off or something like that. And I would have my one Sork that would just be loaded with Magic Find, because that's all I really needed. And then I would just like teleport to Mephisto, one-shot Mephisto, grab the loot, repeat, infinite. That's kind of like what you would do back in the old day in Diablo 2, which, it's okay because of how fast you could just like get a character online, and I got used to just having that, but it was never something that felt particularly good, because you're just like, well, I just have this one character, does the magic find thing, not a particularly powerful character to do literally anything else, just runs to Mephisto, kills Mephisto, and it's done. And it's just a concept that I personally don't like. I don't like having to mess around with rarity. Right now, my warrior has 100 rarity, which is apparently...
But I think you can only do this in D2 because you can teleport. That's not really a thing in PoE 2. I mean, maybe with Temporalis, but that's such a... It will be... I don't know if actually DM mentioned this. Did DM mention this? In some podcast, it was mentioned. We currently have the issue with Temporalis being this cheap because of the dupes. And it will change, right? Like, those prices will change. It will be priced as a Mageblood or Headhunter. Like, actually probably more like a Mageblood. Because to actually achieve such a strong item like Temporalis from Trial of Sekima, you need to do a no-hit run. That's tough, and people will want to be paid for that, right? They want to get paid for that because it's insane. So the item should be powerful. But in general, I don't think it's realistic to teleport across the entire map and kill a boss, because that's also not how you farm in PoE 1. In PoE 2, that's probably why they changed it for you need to kill the rare mobs. Because if it's only kill bosses all the time, people will find a way, again, there will be a meta about which build runs as quickly as physically possible, dodges everything, or tanks everything, and runs as quickly to the boss and kills it. There will be a meta. And I can already tell you, it's probably going to be Deadeye with acrobatics, evasion, and Queen of the Forest. And you run straight to the boss. Just straight through it. That's going to be the meta. Mark my words. And you will have as little life as possible and have rarity stacked on top of it. And then you just go from citadel to citadel. That will be the meta. If they change how you... Like, if they change how to finish maps, right? That's probably what's going to happen. I mean, people did this in Path of Exile 1, right? The invitations to farm them, you want the fastest character physically possible, and then you just go to the boss, and then that's it, pretty much. And trigger the Eldritch mobs, right? Because then you progressed to get the invitation. So... or actually, no, you're only going to a map and trigger it once, right? So, sorry, that's what... Either way, I think because of rarity, I mean, DM definitely doesn't want it, maybe, from what I now understood. like either remove it or it has to be massively changed. I actually like rarity. I wanted to make a video on that, but I could probably make like 6 small videos on the channel, but I kind of don't want that. It kind of feels like a waste. Maybe I'm gonna do shorts. Maybe I'm gonna do shorts about that because they're easily, like, they're easy to consume. Maybe I'm gonna do that. But who knows? You know, you let me know. Would you want to see a 1 to 3 minute video of me chatting about rarity, or would you want a full video? I don't know. Either way, the reason why I like rarity is, here's an example. If I farm 3 hours for a good piece of gear, you know, just one. Maybe I'm saying, okay, you know what? I need a good helmet. All right. I farm 3 hours. I have to, like, trade. It's all about trade. I farm 3 hours for a good piece of gear. Perfect. I can now buy that piece of gear, and I want rarity. Why would I want rarity now on my helmet? Because it now allows me to farm 2.5 hours potentially to get the same good piece of gear and start snowballing. Because, again, it's about progression. I do not want to farm 10 hours in a day to then do it the same, literal same, the next day and the next day and the next day, because there will be no progression. There will be no better loot. Everything will be the same. It will be completely milquetoast and gray. And I don't want that. I want to have more loot as I progress. On my character is easier than maybe on maps, especially early on, right? But, and even if you say, well, it shouldn't be on, like, I don't know how to balance this, but I personally want that. Milquetoast, let's go. But yeah, I personally think that's good. I want that because for me, as someone who has a full-time job, the idea of playing the game for 10 hours, or let's say 5 hours, right? I'm in home office, I'm instantly at home, boom, it's 4 p.m., I play for 5 hours, I work out a little bit, go to bed. So 5 hours done. I have now loot and currency, so I can buy gear that now lets me farm another 5 hours tomorrow, but get more loot. Rinse and repeat. Why is that a bad thing? Why is that a bad thing? I feel like that's amazing. And we're not even talking about increasing the tiers of maps at the same time, because that's on top of that potentially. But also potentially getting tankier so I can run higher tiers of content and maybe ulk them so get even more loot. That's awesome. That's the whole point. You want more loot as time goes on, right? So rarity is perfect for that. So that's just the 2 things I wanted to say. But this also brings back, I don't know if I actually mentioned this earlier. This was actually the last point I wanted to mention. That's the reason why I would love the Atlas skill tree to actually give you some way to convert loot or give you more loot of something at the price of getting less loot of something else. I would love that so heckin' much. I would love that so much. But we'll see. We'll see what happens today during the live stream. It's going to be a juicy. But yeah, those were my thoughts on the podcast. Really good podcast, by the way, by Khan with Darth Microtransaction. Highly recommend checking that